welcome back to the human role. We are now on to our episode where we're going to talk about culture. Thanks so much for everyone taking your time out to listen in to all my past episodes. So, if you missed the last one, definitely go back and check it out. It's a really good episode on a neuroflexible workplace with a great guest, Kay Sargent, that works at HOK. So, really good conversation, a precursor conversation to lead into this episode where we're going to talk about culture, right? And we're going to get into basically workplace culture, is what I am focusing on now. And it is really, really important. So, let's get into specifically what a workplace culture really means, right? So think of it as like the company's attitude, right? Workplace culture is basically the personality of an organization, and it's truly shaped by values. It's shaped by beliefs, behaviors, and it's really created for employees to encompass the organization's traditions, right? So if you think about it, what mission, right? When we talk about mission statements, what is a company's actual mission and goals that they're trying to specifically accomplish? And so I'm sure at the point of our career, right, my network is filled with people that have tenure within the workplace. If you are just starting off in your career, kind of take this as some advice that as you go through the years of working, many of us, including myself, have definitely experienced not so good cultures, right? That thing called the toxic workplace is a real thing. And so when I mentioned just a moment ago, as far as culture being a company's attitude, that's really, the thing to go about it, right? Just think about how you wake up every day and how you may potentially take on your life. And, if something terrible happens, how you look at that. A company is really the same thing, right? Whoever is leading the actual company really should take a stance and focus heavily on culture. So in my last episode, where it was made very clear, the current state that we're on right now is allowing us to essentially rethink everything and restart everything. And so that's really what I want to also focus on when it comes to culture, why it's essential for a business and how companies can really get to it. And then also you yourself and how, you can maybe even potentially contribute to a really, really good culture is where I really want to also focus on today. So let's get into why it could be essential for a company to really focus on their specific culture, right? So when we think about it, your culture and the atmosphere that you create for employees really helps with all employees' well being, their performance, and really, truly, in my opinion, just like the loyalty that someone has to a company. So you really want to focus on what you're doing for your specific employees. And this could really go all the way back to like onboarding, right? So when we want to talk about what a company can actually do to show, their employees or their specific new hires how their culture is, right? So that an employee can make sure that they are aligned with that culture. If you start with proper communication from the beginning, hiring someone, that really goes a long way. The better communication that you have with your employee population, the more comfortable that they feel speaking up on certain things. So there's a lot of environments where employees may or may not feel comfortable kind of being that one that raises their hand when others are maybe a little too shy to do so or might not feel comfortable being a little vocal. If you let your employees know that, hey, look, this is an open door policy and you can come to me, but then also not just say that. So what do we say? Like, don't talk about it, but actually be about it. If you actually show you yourself as, someone who may be in a management position or, leader, the owner of the company, if you show that you are communicating and you are open to feedback, that would essentially draw your employees in to communicate more. And then that helps you identify when issues are coming up and how to quickly, nip those if it's, a bad issue, if it's something that's easily fixed, or if it's something that you guys are still working through and are just not sure what the end result is going to be yet. I think just having that communication with your employees is going to be really, really important. And in return is really essential because, it helps with employees' well-being and them actually wanting to, come to work. Also, too, I think it is really essential to have a proper culture and making sure that you're sticking to it. Just because outside of well-being, it does help employees and their performance, right? So if you're not really feeling it, if you don't feel like the company is really ethical that you're working for, and you may still have to continue to stay there because obviously everyone has, bills to pay and we have finances that we have to cover. If an employee is in a very good atmosphere and a good environment, it will obviously help their performance. And I think a workplace stance or from like an HR stance, it's really important to look at your employees and the population as really look to them as your client, right? So, because if your employees are happy and they're the ones doing the work, then the work's going to get done right. And then, you can move on to the next project. So, you really want to just make sure that you are really focusing on your employees, making sure that they are heard and understood and feel cared for, because that all encompasses and goes into the culture. And in return, goes into your employees' well-being, goes into their then performance, and then you'll get loyalty, which then the loyalty leads into good tenure, right? And so that good tenure means that, if employees are loyal and if they're feeling good, they're going to refer their, friends, which would be, we always love referrals when we're on the HR side. And then it helps with, not only employee retention, but the company's reputation. And that's really the key, right? Your culture is going to lead into your reputation. It does not matter if you have a good idea or plan or vision of something, because if you have ever heard of Peter Drucker, he's a really well-known author, but his one of his most popular statements encompasses this, right? So one of his statements goes as culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you really have to think about that, full suite, right? So when we think about that specific statement, yeah, I mean, you can have a really good strategy in place. You can go out and hire all of like the top dogs, right? If that's what you consider them. You can really put in, great effort to build out this great business plan, get everyone's opinion if you want to. But if all of those people come in and if the culture is terrible and your statement is one thing, but you're going about it the complete opposite way. And if people aren't comfortable and you have, employees potentially butting heads, and if you're accepting that without fully, and properly addressing it, and if your owners and C-suite executives are walking around talking to people in any kind of way, or just maybe not even talking to people at all, maybe walking past people and making people feel like non-existent, if that is occurring, 9 times out of 10, your project is not going to get done. Or if the project does get done because, someone just wants to make sure that they close out the actual project and then get on, you're probably not going to have a good reputation after the fact because, the industry essentially is small. One person knows another person, and then your reputation is, completely done. You think about it, having to go back and fix a bad reputation is a lot harder, right, than just sticking to it and doing the work and doing the best that you can in real time as time goes on. So you want to just make sure that you are doing all that you can to continue on this path of having such a good culture, just because it is very, very critical when you are trying to retain talent. And as we know, and I've talked about it in plenty of other past episodes, we are essentially right now finding ourselves not in just an employer market. We are now in an employee market, right? So employees want to know what their benefits are, right? As COVID has, come and still here, but we've at least gotten used to it now. The entire flexibility of a workplace, right, is really, really a hot topic. So there are companies that want their employees to come back into the office or at least be hybrid. That's another heavy critical factor that we really need to consider. So coinciding with my last episode on the neuroflexible workplace, if you want people to come back into the office, you really need to put some effort into your office, right? Versus having people come back and them either be stuck at a cubicle or them not even have a proper place to sit and, and then be kind of irritated or not able to get their work done. I mean, we touched on, people that may have ADHD. We've talked about, people that could potentially be autistic. You really need to, from an HR stance, really understand your population and then communicate that properly to your directors and your C-suite leaders, and so that way they know how the office needs to be built out. And really talk to your employees. I just said that a moment ago too. I mean, communication is heavy, heavy, heavy key here, right? Employees want to feel like they are heard. And so that, you got to just, you can't just talk about it. You definitely have to be about it, is substantial. You can't just say that this is what we're about and then do something completely different. And if you can really, really, really get your culture down to a T, you can really have a successful business. Now, totally understand not everything or every situation can be perfect. And also, when we talk about communicating, sometimes, I know there's been some executives that I've ran to in the past that just aren't comfortable yet communicating what's potentially to come. But then when the opposite effect of that is that when things are announced, you don't want employees to feel blindsided. So I would say to really just always get something together, some type of communication together, to where even if it doesn't say everything, it just lets the population know of something, right? So they're not totally feeling left out. Another point I want to say about culture is to make sure that you have solid leaders in place. And for me, I really want to just focus on the fact that when I think of leaders, I don't necessarily think that a leader has to be someone with a manager title. So for any employees that are listening that may not be in a specific management role, you can still really be a leader, right? You don't have to have that supervisor, manager, heavy director, C-suite title, and think that you can't be a leader. You can absolutely still be a leader, without that specific management title. There are a lot of managers, I know we've all come across them, I myself, that have this management title and have no clue how to manage. They have no clue how to talk to people. Some people have managed me, have no clue what, I specifically may have been doing all day, or have no clue what my specific job entails, right? They might have just been thrown into a management position. And that does happen, at some time, at companies, and sometimes it's at no fault to them either, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I just want to communicate to everyone, like, always really go about your day trying to be a leader as much as possible, especially once you start getting some good experience and tenure under your belt, right? You don't want to show up for a job and then just sit there and be mundane and do anything. We are in a stage now, especially with AI coming in, that a lot of those smaller day to day tedious tasks are now, truth be told, going to be taken away. And I have said it in a couple of other past episodes, we have to start being more strategic. So from an employee stance, and we focus on that, you can start being, more strategic in your role, but you can also start being a leader. So imagine or think back to when you first started your career. I had this on my side too, what, over 15 years ago, where I came in, I might have had straight out of college, had no clue what I was doing. And I did have, a couple of really great people that took me under their wing and, kind of explained stuff to me. And things may not have made sense at that time, but probably year after year, now that I'm, older, definitely a lot of things that they were saying then definitely make sense now. So just keep that in mind, that if you see a new person that comes in, isn't sure what to do, isn't sure how to go about things, do what you can to take them under your wing, right? Definitely, talk to them, communicate with them if you see they're struggling in some area. I think it is definitely essential to really dig into them and just kind of let them know that they're not alone in this situation, because then that does show you're a leader, and that could potentially get you to a management position if that's what you want, right? Some people don't necessarily want to manage people. I would say try to maybe at least manage one person so you get your feet wet a little bit to see if you like it, or if you don't like it. There's plenty of people that I know in their career now have no interest in managing people, because that is a whole job within itself. But I think if you just continue to showcase some type of leadership and also live up to your company's culture too, that's always great, right? It's always a plus for you. Even if the company still doesn't go over well, even if the company still isn't in technically like a good stance at all, at least you can leave there with that added level of experience. So that's always good. And it helps, with teamwork. And then for, anyone in a management position or a leadership, well, what people would kind of consider a leadership position, right? Which would be a actual C-suite level position, senior director position, or director position, right? Or someone that has a title of a manager or supervisor. You really want to make sure that people are not feeling like they're unheard. I would never go after, like, the whole scare tactic, right? So that I know sometimes that's a tactic that managers try to use, but that is never a good reflection of culture, right? That's never going to make people feel comfortable opening up to you. It's only going to make people shut down and not want to talk about things. And then next thing you know, that whole quiet quitting is coming into place. So I would always say and suggest that you definitely tried your best to be open, to all of your employees, talk to them, have those one-on-one meetings, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Definitely make sure that you continue to hold an open door policy. And then also to live by your company's culture. It's really important that you yourself, as a manager and in a leadership, specifically what people would initially look at as a leadership role and title, that you yourself are always following suit with that, right? So that no one can think that you reflect poorly, on the business. And so sometimes that does happen, but I just definitely want to stress that because that is really important. And to me, it's really important too, because a lot of people think, like the misconception, I guess you can say, is that people really think that culture is like just an HR thing. And that's not it. Culture is the full, like it encompasses like the whole company, executives, it encompasses everybody, right? And so it cannot just fall on one person or one department's shoulders. Like HR can't fix the culture if they can have a conversation with the employee, right, and try to make the employee feel better. But once the employee steps out of their office and goes back and has to go back to maybe potentially, a bad manager, it's never going to get better, right? So this is the work for everybody involved, even if you're considered a lower level employee of the company. All the way up to the owners of the company, you really, really, really have to stay focused on culture, and everyone has to show it. And another thing I definitely want to mention is that you really should be like adaptable, right, to your culture, because who your company was a couple years ago may not be who your company is now, right? And so when we think about pre-COVID, I absolutely would have never thought of a work from home environment, right? There were, of course, companies doing that. And there were a couple of people that I remember had already been working from home before then for other companies, but I myself had never envisioned being a part of a company being able to work from home, especially because a lot of my heavy role was payroll, right? And so we had to get the payroll checks, we had to get them signed, we had to get them approved, all that type of stuff. And so I really just never foresaw being at home. And so now that we have gone through COVID, everyone has had to reinvent the wheel. And now that although we're still in COVID, we're still, for essentially, we have come out of it. People have adjusted. Your culture definitely has to adapt to that too, right? Your culture could be completely different. And so I would say to reevaluate your culture year after year, every couple of years. Maybe you want to do the every 5 year mark because things could change, right? Ownership could change, management could change. Maybe your culture was really focused towards one specific point, and then maybe now it's shifted to another point, right? As the world evolves. So that's one thing I would say. Always revisit your, mission statement. Always revisit your culture specifically, and just make sure that if there does need to be a change, there's a solid reason for it. And then I would always say to make sure you are communicating that, right? You definitely got to communicate that to your population as well. So keep that in mind too. Let's focus on empowering our employees, right? Focus on their well being. Mental health is a huge topic right now. Very similar to what we talked about in my last episode, is that people are now being more vocal. People are not necessarily as shy as they were, years ago, right? And so now that these conversations are being had, it is definitely opening up, a lot of can of worms of a bunch of other things that people really need to consider. And so I would say not only does your communication need to be top tier, but you really need to have like the full benefits laid out of everything. So literally your benefits that you're offering to your employees, but also the whole role of culture and like why you're focused on this culture and how that can even benefit the company. Because it all comes full circle, right? And so as long as that's communicated, the employee gets in and starts feeling comfortable and then feels that type of loyalty, right, to your company, that could essentially help the company still progress, right? And maybe that brings in more, whatever your industry you're in, that could bring in more clients, that could bring in more top tier employees, right? That can keep with your tenure. And so there's only a few companies, I won't name drop them, but only a few companies that I have heard of that have very, very, very strong tenure. And those companies, to my understanding, through certain research, have gone through very, very, very heavy culture, reviews, and made sure that they've stuck to that and been very intentional about it. So it is definitely possible. We just have to make sure that we stick to it. So another thing, last thing to chat about is how companies could really factor this all in to their organization. And so, of course, you're talking about your surveys, right? And so surveys I know sometimes can be scary for employees, even if it's surveys where you tell them, hey, look, it's fully confidential or whatever. Not everyone believes that. I remember back in the day, I didn't believe that at all. But so sometimes you may not get the best feedback from that. So you really have to spend a lot of time building and fostering those relationships. But surveys are really good to kind of just hopefully get some type of data from your employee population, because there are going to be those groups of employees that are really open to being vocal. But separate from that, I know I mentioned like the onboarding piece, really communicating with everyone, making sure you have proper documents together and are training them on, what your whole mission is about. But really heavy, heavy on the leadership. And if people in management and supervisor roles really focus on that specific part of being a leader, that's going to trickle down to your employees who are not even, in a specific management position. So if I were you, I really, really stay focused on that too. So that being said, I'm going to close out this episode about culture, but all of this is going to intertwine with one another. So the neuroflexible workplace that I talked about last episode to this episode on culture is going to now lead us into the next episode, where we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So definitely have another really, really great guest that's going to be on for that one. So I'm really excited to get into that conversation, because it all is going to, come together on this specific focus on right now in regards to the actual workplace. So stay tuned for that. That'll be posted in a couple of weeks. But thank you all again for listening in to another episode on workplace culture from the human role. Really appreciate everyone's support, and see you in a few.